So some directors are known for being very visual directors and some aren't very visual. How is it working with either of those two types of directors?
It's no different. You're still making a film. And I think that every director works in a different way. And some of them want help, some of them don't want help. Some of them will say exactly what they want. And I've never known a director yet choose the size of lens, but directors have it in their head what they want to see, and if you can get onto their wavelength, you can give it to them. Some of them will tell you what they want, others will just deal with the actors and say, what do you think? And then you just take over and use your experience and your expertise
to actually... Do you have a preference to, I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have a director who's just good at everything.
Well, yes, but I mean, what you're saying is, do you have a preference? It's like saying, yeah, I'd love a director who makes really interesting films that are all visual, but that's not the business. You know, cinema is a business, and therefore there are a lot of films like Little Women, for instance, which is all talk. It's just people talking consistently. So that's a different approach to something like James Bond, which is all action. You know, every film has its different layers, and if you're working with a director who, it's nice to work with a director who knows what he wants, but one of the last pictures I did recently was all pre-visualized, and I was told every shot, the size of lens, the height of the camera, the speed of everything, and how long the shot was going to last. I found that very restrictive. Very restrictive. I'd actually prefer the director to say, well, what do you think? Yeah. So I can say, I was thinking the camera would be there, then you could see him do that, and him do that. That's what we do, and I feel I would prefer that.
Do you have, or for example, Kate, do you have a preference if you had a choice between a director who's very strong visually, or just very opinionated, let's say that, or had the choice of working with a director who had a little bit less opinion about how visually the film's told? Which one would you go for? Because it's ultimately one would give you more freedom as a cinematographer.
I think you can have freedom though when you work with a director that is very visual, because if they're coming with a huge extensive knowledge of photography or film, then that can be really fun to sort of bounce off, and you maybe have different conversations that are more specific because they already have a great language of understanding about, you know, if they do stills, they understand what a 50mm is and what it does, and so you can get something that's very much more focused. But then, you know, on the other side, if you've got a director that's, you know, very, very performance orientated and just almost says, look, it's up to you how you then you know, that's a different freedom.
But do you like that freedom? I mean, I personally like that.
I do, but I also feel like
it's only because some directors can micromanage you so much.
Yeah.
In a slightly unnecessary way. You want a director always to have that feeling of authorship of the image, but the micromanagement is, if you're not careful, where's your input? How do you put your stamp on it?
It doesn't necessarily become micromanagement if they've got a sympathy to knowing you'll probably want to use that backlight. You know, like if they are visual, then they'll go, Kate, I'm thinking about blocking it this way. Does that work for you? Whereas sometimes when you work with a director that is very inexperienced, or not so aware of the camera, then they're not blocking a scene or having that conversation with that sort of stuff in the back of your mind. So it can be a longer process to try and kind of get it round to where you might want to put it.
And how does it affect you? Do you have a preference about whether you work with a director who has a very strong visual interpretation or a director who has less will ultimately give you more freedom?
I don't think someone who has less visual imagination gives me more freedom at all. And I much prefer working with directors who've got a very strong idea and a very strong vision of what they want, because that's what I need to do. I need to try and get in their heads and have a dialogue. Yeah. And because I'm very visual, that's how my dialogue goes. And I find that out very quickly in interviews, actually, if the person, and people think differently, people's minds are wired differently, and some people think very cerebrally, and they think about character, but they can't see a picture at all. And that's fine, and they can do very good work, but I find that person very difficult to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense that in an ideal world you would work with a director who has a very strong visual sense because it's a visual medium, and is somebody who is a good collaborator.
I mean, they need a strong visual sense, but there needs to be a dialogue. So I don't want to be just do it this way, put the camera here on a 25mm with a light. That's not going to work at all. But you want to be able to riff off each other and have ideas and bring something to the party. And it's more that if I say something or come up with a reference or an idea, they can understand what I'm talking about, and they can see it. And you can see instantly whether people, and it's producers as well, it's lots of people across the set, they get it or they don't. They can see what you're talking about or they can't.
So one of the things that I've tried to work on is things like the crossing the line. So when I first worked with Danny Boyle, we we'd have lots of scenes where people were talking to each other, but there were only very few where he wanted the conversation to be direct. So we would always shoot the 2 close-ups on the same side of the line, and then about 14 other variations of 2-shot, whatever. And his answer to that methodology was, basically it's very, very easy to cut a scene together when you can cut a close-up to a close-up. But when you have to discover the scene by moving around in a 3-dimensional way from a 2-shot to a single, to a 2-shot to a single, to a wide, then you have to choose your moments, and it just is sort of an anti-executive editorial decision-making process where, but there are certain scenes where you do need to do those things. And for me, it would be to be just constantly questioning the rule book as to why you can't insert a macro shot into the middle of a conversation.
I think directors need to make decisions. They need to direct. And I think some directors never learn that. It's kind of an overcover. And I think there are only so many hours in a day, and there are only so many shots you can actually achieve. And you can achieve 50 setups badly, or you can achieve 15 setups really, really well.
I did a film.
America,
I did a film last year, and this is the first time it's ever happened to me, where the director, and purely because he was French, had final cut. I had no idea, and I've never done a film where it's just never been mentioned that the director has final cut. So I think that it puts them on the back foot. Whereas this film that I did last year was the best edited film I'd ever shot. It was stunning because he had final cut. Nobody could say. So his relationship with the editor was this obviously perfect relationship based on what we had shot. He was quite a novice director, a great playwright, but a novice director. And when I watched the film, I was like, wow, that editor's and that director has just created something I've never had before in a feature film, where I see a lot of films that I've shot and I just go, what happened?
Oh, yeah.
What the hell happened?
Oh, God, yeah.
What the hell happened?
But I think that speaks to the, like being more decisive when you're shooting and more selective and going, these are the 15 shots we're doing today. Because if you do have the 50-shot version, then that can become any number of things in the edit. Whereas, when you've been more considered and gone, we didn't get that close-up for a reason, it's a lot more expensive for someone, to come back and say, right, we're going to reshoot it.
You need cojones to do that, because that you need. I worked with a very strong director, and I said, should we get this coverage? And he said, no, if we do, we'll use it. Yeah. And a non-strong director will say, we need that coverage because they're going to ask for it and they won't employ me again if I don't give it to them. Yeah. And it's which side you're on. And obviously, for me, and I suppose everyone in this room, it's much better if you have a director who knows what they want and can defend it and is in the edit and it's their cut. Yeah. Really is important, because they're the ones who know why they shot stuff that way. And it's heartbreaking to see all that work gone, and you end up with a load of talking heads.